This is not random. This is not accidental. And it is definitely not a coincidence. If you are hearing these words right now, it is because God Himself arranged this moment for you. Out of billions of videos, billions of voices, billions of distractions fighting for your attention, this is the one that stopped your scroll. You didn't land here by chance. You were led here. And the urgency in the title is not exaggeration. It is divine timing pressing against your spirit. God says, this is not a coincidence. I arranged this moment for you. Don't scroll past. Open now before 11:59 p.m. That is not a suggestion. That is an interruption from heaven. There are moments in life when God breaks through the noise, when He steps into the ordinary flow of your routine and places a divine pause right in front of you. You were scrolling. You were distracted. Maybe you were tired. Maybe you were looking for comfort. Maybe you were avoiding something heavy on your heart. And suddenly, this appeared. That is how God moves sometimes. Not always with thunder. Not always with earthquakes. But with a still, precise interruption that feels almost too specific to ignore. The reason you feel something stirring inside you right now is because your spirit recognizes divine timing. Your mind may try to rationalize it. It may say, it's just another video. But deep down, something is whispering, pay attention. That whisper is not anxiety. It is not fear. It is not manipulation. It is alignment. Heaven scheduled this appointment with you before you even picked up your device. Before you even opened this app. Before this day unfolded the way it did. There is a reason the message says, don't scroll past. Because scrolling is easy. Ignoring is easy. Delaying is easy. But obedience in small moments, that is where destiny shifts. And the phrase open now before 11:59 p.m. carries more weight than you realize. In the spiritual realm, timing matters. God operates in seasons, in windows, in appointed moments. There are Kairos times, divine opportunities, that do not last forever. They are invitations, and invitations require response. 11:59 p.m. represents the final minute before something changes. It is the edge of transition, the last breath before a new day begins. In your life, you may feel like you are at 11:59, at the edge of something ending or something beginning. Perhaps you have been praying for a sign. Perhaps you asked God quietly, if this is you, show me clearly. And now here you are, confronted with a message that speaks directly into your situation. That is not coincidence. That is orchestration. What if the thing you have been waiting for is not a massive, dramatic event, but a moment of attention? What if your breakthrough begins not with fireworks, but with focus? The enemy fights hardest for your attention because attention determines direction. If he can keep you distracted, he can keep you delayed. But when God captures your attention, He realigns your path. There are people who missed life-changing opportunities because they brushed them off as ordinary. They assumed it was random. They thought they could return later. But divine moments are not always repeatable. When God arranges something, it comes with a grace attached to that specific time. That is why the urgency is loving, not threatening. It is a father saying, don't miss this. I set this up for you. You may not even fully understand why this is important yet. That is okay. Obedience does not require full understanding. It requires trust. The very fact that you are still listening right now proves something. It proves that your spirit is leaning in. It proves that despite the noise, despite the doubts, despite the business, you are open, And let me say this clearly. God does not waste moments. If He interrupts you, it is because something is shifting. If He captures your focus, it is because something is aligning. If He places urgency in front of you, it is because the clock in the spiritual realm is moving toward something significant. Ask yourself honestly, what were you thinking about before this appeared? What concern was sitting on your heart? What decision were you postponing? What prayer felt unanswered? Now look at the timing. Look at how precise this feels. That precision is not luck. It is intentional. Heaven is not chaotic. It is ordered. And when God says, I arranged this moment for you, He means that every detail surrounding it was seen. The hour, a mood, the vulnerability, the curiosity, all of it. He knows how to reach you in a way that feels personal, because it is personal. This is not about fear. It is about awakening. It is about recognizing that your life is not drifting aimlessly. There is guidance. There is orchestration. There is divine involvement in places you thought were ordinary. Even here. Even now. So before you consider moving on, pause. Breathe. Recognize that something sacred may be happening in what looks like something simple. You are not here by accident. This moment did not slip through the cracks of the universe. It was scheduled. And the fact that you are still here listening confirms one powerful truth. You were meant to hear this today. What you may not realize is that there has been a battle over your attention long before you pressed play on this message. Not a visible battle. Not one you can see with your natural eyes. But a silent war nonetheless. Because attention is not just about what you look at, it is about what you align with. And the moment you begin to align with something, you begin to move toward it. There is a reason distractions increase whenever you are close to a breakthrough. Have you noticed that? The closer you get to clarity, the louder the noise becomes. The closer you get to making a decision that could shift your life, the more interruptions seem to rise. Messages pop up. Doubts creep in. Fatigue suddenly feels heavier. It is not random. Distraction is one of the enemy's most effective strategies because if he cannot destroy you, he will attempt to delay you. And delay often feels harmless. It whispers, you can come back later. It says, this isn't urgent. It convinces you that postponing obedience has no consequence. But small delays can create large detours. A missed moment today can become a prolonged season tomorrow. That is why your focus is so valuable. Your focus is the doorway through which God releases direction. Think about it. Every major turning point in your life started with attention. You noticed something. You paid attention to a feeling. You listened to a voice. You responded to a nudge. And that response shifted your path. In the same way, ignoring something can quietly redirect you away from what was meant for you. That is why this moment matters. The world trains you to scroll quickly, to consume rapidly, to move without reflection. But God moves differently. He often speaks in stillness. He draws you in gently, not aggressively. He waits for your willingness. And when He arranges a moment like this, it is because He sees something ahead that you cannot yet see. There are people who can testify to this. Someone once almost ignored a simple prompting, a message that felt small at the time. They were about to scroll past. They were tired. They thought, I'll watch this later. But something inside said, not later. Now, they listened. And within days, that single moment of attention led to a decision that changed everything. A door opened. A relationship was restored. A burden lifted. all because they chose not to dismiss what felt ordinary. You see, divine interruptions rarely look dramatic. They often look like this: simple, direct, easy to overlook. That is why the battle is subtle. The enemy does not always need chaos to win. Sometimes all he needs is your indifference. If he can convince you that this is just another voice, he can keep you from recognizing the one behind it. But something inside you knows this is different. That is why you are still here. That is why you did not scroll past in the first few seconds. Your spirit sensed weight. They sensed urgency. And that urgency is not pressure, it is protection. God protects you by pulling your attention toward what matters before the clock runs out on an opportunity. Let me ask you something deeply personal. How many times have you said, "I wish I had listened sooner"? How many times have you looked back and realized that the warning was there, the sign was there, the nudge was there, but you brushed it aside? This is not condemnation. This is awareness. Because awareness is the first step toward alignment. Right now, your attention is an act of agreement. By listening, you are signaling that you are open. And openness invites instruction. Instruction invites change. Change invites breakthrough. It all begins with something as simple as refusing to scroll. And this is where your response becomes powerful. If this message is speaking to you, if you feel that inner confirmation that this is not random, then do something bold right now. Like this video as a declaration that you recognize divine timing. Comment "I received" to seal your agreement with what God is doing in this moment. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss another appointed word meant for your life. And share this message with someone who may be on the edge of missing their own breakthrough. Your action could be the interruption that saves someone else from delay. Engagement is not just digital interaction. It is spiritual alignment. When you publicly agree with what God is speaking, you strengthen your own faith. When you share it, you become part of the delivery system heaven uses to reach others. Do not underestimate that. There is a hidden battle over your attention, because your attention determines your direction, and direction determines your destiny. Today, in this very moment, you chose to pause. You chose to listen. And that choice is already shifting something in the unseen realm. The question now is not whether this moment was arranged. The question is how you will respond to it. There was a moment, maybe late at night, maybe early in the morning, when you whispered something to God that no one else heard. It wasn't poly. It wasn't religious. It was raw. It was honest. You asked for a sign. You asked for confirmation. You asked Him to make it clear because you were tired of guessing. And now here you are, staring at words that feel like they are staring back at you. This is not a coincidence. I arranged this moment for you. Don't scroll past. Open now before 11:59 p.m. You may have thought your prayer disappeared into silence, but heaven recorded it. God answers in ways that often feel subtle before they feel undeniable. He repeats themes. He aligns messages. He confirms through patterns. Think about the last few days. Has this topic been surfacing repeatedly? Has a certain thought refused to leave you alone? Has urgency been building quietly in your spirit? That is not random repetition. That is orchestration. When God wants to confirm something, He does not rely on one signal alone. He layers it until your heart recognizes the consistency. You ask for clarity, and clarity has arrived, but not in the dramatic way you expected. Sometimes we look for lightning when God is sending alignment. Sometimes we expect a booming voice when He chooses a precise moment on an ordinary day. The prophetic meaning of open now is not just about clicking on a video. It is about opening your heart, opening your ears, opening your willingness, because the breakthrough you are praying for is often locked behind obedience. There is something powerful about the word now, not tomorrow, not when you feel more prepared, not when circumstances look better. Now, immediate obedience disrupts cycles of delay. Immediate response creates momentum in the spiritual realm. And when the message includes a specific time, before 11:59 p.m., it signals urgency. It represents the final window before transition. Is heaven saying, "This is your moment. Do not treat it casually"? You may be thinking, but what exactly is supposed to happen before 11:59 p.m.? That is where faith enters. Faith does not always receive full details. It responds to divine prompting. It trusts that God sees the full picture even when you only see a fragment. The edge of minute symbolizes the edge of change. Something in your life is at a tipping point. A decision, a release, a step forward, and surrender. And God is drawing a line in the sand, not to pressure you, but to protect your future. Have you ever noticed how many miracles in life happen at the last minute? When hope feels thin, when options seem exhausted, when the clock appears to be running out. At final minute, 11:59, is often where fear tries to rise the loudest. But it is also where faith can shine the brightest. Because when you choose to respond right before the shift, you demonstrate trust beyond logic. This is the sign you asked for. Not because it is loud, but because it is personal. Not because it is dramatic, but because it aligns too perfectly with what you have been wrestling with internally. The fact that you feel a stirring right now is confirmation. The fact that you cannot dismiss this easily is confirmation. The fact that you are still listening is confirmation. And here is something deeper. Signs are not just about information. They are about activation. God does not send signs to entertain curiosity. He sends signs to initiate movement. What you do in the next hours matters. The thoughts you entertain, the decision you finalize, the courage you choose. Before 11:59 p.m., something in your spirit is meant to shift from hesitation to action. But listen carefully. What happens in the last minute before midnight often determines what carries into the next day. There is a spiritual principle here. The posture you hold at the edge of transition shapes the atmosphere of what follows. If you carry fear into midnight, fear grows roots. If you carry faith into midnight, faith opens doors. At the end of this part, I want you to seal this moment. If this resonates with your spirit, type "I am aligned" in the comments right now. Blessing code 914 is now activated over your life. This number is not random. It represents divine alignment before transition. As you declare your alignment, you are prophetically stepping into agreement with what God is arranging. And before we move forward, hold on, because what is about to be revealed next changes how you see this deadline completely. The meaning of 11:59 p.m. is deeper than you imagine, and understanding it may unlock the courage you need in this very hour. If this message has confirmed what you have been praying about, then understand this. You are not just watching a video. You are standing in a divinely arranged field of harvest. Scripture declares, as long as the earth remains, seed time and harvest shall not cease, and God is speaking that over you right now. When you sow into fertile ground, you participate in the miracle of multiplication. I feel led to say this plainly. I am inviting you to become part of the river God is using to reach hidden hearts. Through super thanks, channel membership, or a PayPal donation using the link in the description or the QR code on your screen, You are placing seed into soil that carries prophetic fire across nations. This is not about supporting a channel. It is about fueling a mission that rescues distracted souls at their 11:59 moment. Those who sow into light will never walk in darkness. As you give, may open heavens respond to you. May oil flow over your household, and may the same urgency that brought you here accelerate blessing in your life. Act now. Seal your obedience with generosity. There is something deeply symbolic about 11:59 p.m. It is not just a time on a clock. It is the final breath before transition. It is the thin line between what was and what is about to be. 1 minute later, everything carries a new date, a new marking, a new beginning. And spiritually, that edge matters more than most people realize. Throughout biblical history, God has often moved at the edge of impossibility, when situations looked sealed, when outcomes seemed finalized, when human strength had reached its limit. The final hour has always been a sacred space for divine intervention. When the children of Israel stood trapped between the sea and their pursuers, it looked like the end. But it was actually the threshold. When walls stood too high and enemies too strong, God waited until obedience met pressure, and then He moved. 11:59 p.m. represents that threshold in your life. It represents the moment when delay feels heavy, when doubt tries to whisper that nothing is changing, when fatigue suggests you should stop believing. But the final minute is not proof that nothing is happening. It is often proof that something is aligning behind the scenes. There is a difference between delay and divine setup. Delay feels stagnant. It feels frustrating. It feels like being forgotten. But a divine setup is strategic. It is precise. It is orchestrated. When God allows you to reach 11:59, it is not to panic you. It is to position you. Because what happens at the edge requires a specific posture of trust. Midnight in Scripture often symbolized decisive movement. Chains fell at midnight. Deliverance came at midnight. Shifts occurred when darkness was at its deepest. That pattern reveals something profound. God does not fear the clock running low. He specializes in last-minute transformations. When human logic says, "It's too late," heaven says, "It's perfectly timed." You may feel like you are living in an 11:59 season right now. Perhaps you are on the brink of a financial decision, on the brink of ending something that has drained you, on the brink of stepping into something unfamiliar but necessary. And fear whispers that you should wait, that you should postpone, that you should protect yourself by remaining still. But what if this final minute is not meant for retreat? What if it is meant for surrender? The spiritual meaning of 11:59 is surrender under pressure. It is faith when evidence feels thin. It is obedience when comfort tempts you to hesitate. Because once midnight strikes, the atmosphere changes, and what you carry into that new day matters. Imagine standing at the door of a new season. The door is closed but not locked. The key is in your hand. The clock is ticking. You have 1 minute to decide whether you will trust the one who arranged the moment or retreat into familiarity. That is what 11:59 feels like. It is not about fear of missing out. It is about recognizing the sacredness of transition. There are times when God allows urgency to intensify so that clarity becomes unavoidable. When the clock approaches midnight, distractions fade. What matters becomes obvious. Priorities sharpen. You suddenly see what you truly value, and that clarity is a gift. The reason the message emphasizes open now before 11:59 p.m. is because obedience tied to timing carries momentum. Obedience after momentum fades feels heavier. When God draws your attention to a specific window, He is highlighting a grace period. a moment when his hand is actively moving, when favor is aligned with responsiveness. Do not misunderstand this. God is not bound by time, but we are. And He works within our timeline to teach us trust. He uses moments like 11:59 to reveal what is inside us. Will we respond quickly? Will we cling to comfort? Will we believe that even if the clock seems late, He is never late? There is also something deeply personal about the final minute. It is quiet, reflective, still. At 11:59 p.m., most of the day's noise has faded. The busyness slows. You are left alone with your thoughts. And in that quiet, truth becomes louder. Conviction becomes clear. Direction becomes sharper. Perhaps God chose this symbolic deadline because He knows you have been wavering. You have been thinking, "I'll decide later." But later has stretched longer than it should have. And now, here at the edge, He is inviting you to cross over. This is not about superstition. It is about symbolism. It is about recognizing that spiritual transitions often mirror natural ones. Just as a new day begins at midnight, a new season can begin at the exact moment you choose alignment over hesitation. If you feel pressure rising as you approach your own 11:59, understand this. Pressure often precedes breakthrough. The tighter the tension, the closer the shift. The final minute is not the end of opportunity. It is the doorway to it. So when you hear, "Open now before 11:59 p.m., hear it as a loving urgency. Hear it as heaven saying, "Step forward. Trust me." Carry faith into the next chapter. Because once the clock strikes midnight, what you chose in the final minute will echo into the new day. There is something you need to understand clearly. You were not just browsing. You were being guided. What feels casual on the surface is often carefully orchestrated beneath it. You may think an algorithm brought this message to you. You may assume it was chance, timing, or habit. But God is not limited by platforms, systems, or digital pathways. He can use anything to position you exactly where you need to be. You have experienced this before, even if you did not recognize it at the time. A random conversation that answered a private question. A song that played at the precise moment you were breaking internally. A message that arrived seconds after you whispered a silent prayer. These are not coincidences stacked on top of each other. They are coordinates. They are evidence of divine navigation. Think about how many tiny decisions had to align for you to be here right now. The time you opened your device. The video you watched before this. The exact second you pause your scrolling. Even your emotional state in this moment matters. You could have been distracted beyond recognition. You could have ignored the prompting. But something nudged you to stop. Something whispered, "Pay attention." That whisper was guidance. We often accept divine direction to look dramatic. We imagine burning bushes, visible signs, or unmistakable voices. But most of God's leading happens in subtleties. It happens in impressions. It happens in inner stirrings. It happens through what feels like ordinary pathways. The extraordinary part is not the platform. It is the precision. You were led here because there is something unfolding in your life that requires awareness. You are standing at a crossroads, whether you realize it fully or not. And crossroads require clarity. Without clarity, you hesitate. With clarity, you move. There is a spiritual GPS that operates beyond your understanding. When you drift slightly off course, it recalculates. When you pause too long, it reroutes. When you wander into confusion, it redirects. That is what may be happening right now. You may have felt uncertain recently. You may have sensed that something was shifting but could not define it. And instead of leaving you in that fog, God guided you to a moment that would pierce through it. Randomness is often heaven's disguise. What appears casual is frequently intentional. Consider how many people are online at any given moment. Consider how many voices compete for attention. Yet this is the one that stopped you. That is not statistical probability alone. It is spiritual positioning. There are seasons when God gently pulls you closer without announcing it loudly. He narrows your focus. He removes certain distractions. He heightened your sensitivity. You begin to notice patterns. You begin to feel that something is aligning. That sense of alignment is not imagination. It is confirmation. You might wonder why God would use something as simple as a video to reach you. But throughout history, He has used simple vessels to deliver profound messages. A shepherd's staff became an instrument of miracles. A small stone shifted the outcome of a battle. A whisper carried more authority than a storm. The method is not what makes it powerful. The sender is. And perhaps you have underestimated how personal this is. You may assume that messages like this are broad, meant for many. And while others may hear it, the timing of it in your life makes it deeply individual. God does not mass-produce encounters. He customizes them. He knows the details you have not shared with anyone. He knows the decision you are postponing. He knows the fear you are trying to silence. And He knows exactly how to position a moment that intersects with those hidden places. There is also something important about recognizing guidance when it comes. Many people pray for direction but ignore it when it arrives quietly. They expect clarity to feel dramatic. But clarity often feels calm. It feels steady. It feels like a subtle confidence rising beneath the noise. If you sense even a small degree of that calm right now, that steady inner pull, pay attention to it. That is what divine leading feels like. It does not force. It invites. It does not shout. It confirms. You were led here because something is being prepared ahead of you. Guidance is rarely about the present moment alone. It is about what is coming. God positions you before you encounter what is next. He strengthens you before the challenge appears. He clarifies you before the opportunity opens. And here is the powerful truth. Being led means you are not alone in this process. You are not navigating blindly. Even when you feel uncertain, there is a hand adjusting your steps. Even when you feel delayed, there is movement happening beyond your awareness. Tonight, before 11:59 p.m., you may notice subtle shifts in your thinking. A new boldness, a release of hesitation, a clearer sense of direction. Do not dismiss that as coincidence. It is the continuation of being led. You were guided here for a reason. Not to be entertained, not to be momentarily inspired, but to be aligned. And when alignment happens, movement follows. There is a kind of power that only activates when obedience is immediate, not delayed, not negotiated, not partially agreed to. Immediate obedience carries a spiritual momentum that hesitation can interrupt. And when God says, "Open now before 11:59 p.m., He is not just emphasizing urgency. He is highlighting opportunity. Because certain doors respond to responsiveness. Think about how many times in your life you felt prompted to act, but you waited. You told yourself you needed more clarity, more confirmation, more confidence. And while wisdom is important, there is a difference between discernment and delay. Discernment seeks understanding. Delay avoids commitment. Immediate obedience, however, steps forward even when every detail is not visible. Your doors that only open in moments of alignment. These doors are not forced open by effort alone. They respond to faith in action. When you act quickly in agreement with what God is speaking, you demonstrate trust. And trust releases movement in the unseen realm. Obedience is not about proving loyalty. It is about positioning yourself where grace is flowing. When God highlights a moment, it is because grace is attached to that moment. Grace to decide. Grace to release. Grace to step forward. But grace tied to a specific window feels lighter when responded to quickly. The longer you resist, the heavier it can feel. You may not realize it, but the word now carries weight in the spiritual realm. Now disrupts cycles. Now interrupts fear. Now silences overthinking. When you say yes in the present moment, you prevent doubt from building momentum. Doubt thrives in delay. Faith thrives in action. Imagine standing at the edge of a river that has just begun to part. The pathway is visible, but only for a limited time. If you hesitate too long, the current may begin to close again. But if you move immediately, you cross while the way is clear. That is what obedience in the now feels like. It steps into the opening while the opening is present. There is also a blessing attached to responsiveness. When you respond quickly, you align with heaven's rhythm. And heaven's rhythm is never rushed, but it is always precise. Immediate obedience does not mean reckless decisions. It means sensitive listening followed by confident action. Perhaps tonight, before 11:59 p.m., you will feel prompted to do something specific. To send a message you have been postponing. To pray with sincerity instead of routine. To release resentment you have been holding. To finalize a decision you have been circling. That prompting is not random. It is an invitation. And invitations have expiration moments. What opens when you obey immediately? Clarity opens. Peace opens. Acceleration opens. When you move quickly in response to divine prompting, confusion loses its grip. Peace settles because you are no longer wrestling internally. And acceleration begins because you are no longer standing still. Hesitation often creates internal turbulence. You feel the nudge, but you resist it. You sense the direction, but you question it repeatedly. That internal tug-of-war drains energy. Immediate obedience resolves the tension. It says, I trust you, and trust releases rest. There is also something transformative about acting before fear can talk you out of it. Fear grows stronger with time. The longer you analyze, the louder fear becomes. But when you respond promptly, fear does not have time to construct arguments. You step forward before insecurity can build walls. And here is a deeper truth. Obedience in small moments prepares you for larger assignments. When you learn to respond quickly in what seems minor, you build spiritual sensitivity. You train your heart to move with precision. You become less resistant and more receptive. Many people wait for grand instructions from God, but ignore the small nudges. Yet it is often the small obediences that unlock significant doors. A simple act of faith can shift atmospheres. A quiet surrender can break long-standing barriers. A quick yes can redirect an entire season. Tonight, the emphasis on open now is not accidental. It is strategic. There is something about this window that carries grace. Something about this timing that aligns with what is unfolding in your life. And your responsiveness determines how smoothly you transition into what comes next. Obedience does not guarantee comfort, but it guarantees alignment. And alignment produces strength. When you are aligned, you move with purpose instead of pressure. You act with conviction instead of infusion. So ask yourself honestly, What is the one thing you have been sensing that requires action? What is the step that keeps resurfacing in your thoughts? That may be the door waiting for your immediate response. When you obey immediately, you step into flow. You step into momentum. You step into the unfolding of what God has already prepared ahead of you. The window is open. The moment is present. And what opens next may depend on how quickly you say yes. There is a truth many people avoid because it feels uncomfortable. Ignoring divine timing has consequences. Not because God is harsh. Not because He is waiting to punish. But because timing carries alignment. And when alignment is ignored, momentum is lost. The invitation may still exist, but the ease attached to it can fade. When God arranges a moment and highlights it with urgency, it is never to create fear. It is to protect you from drift. Drift is subtle. It does not feel dangerous at first. It feels harmless. It feels like postponing a decision for another day. It feels like telling yourself you will pray later, act later, respond later. But drift accumulates, and what begins as a small delay can stretch into a season of stagnation. Think about opportunities in your past. Moments when you sensed clearly what you needed to do, but hesitation crept in. Maybe you delayed a conversation that needed to happen. Maybe you postponed stepping into something new because it felt uncomfortable. And later, you looked back and realized the window had shifted. The chance was not entirely gone, but it required more effort, more struggle, more rebuilding. Divine timing often comes with grace that makes obedience lighter. When you move within that grace window, things align more smoothly. Favor feels present. Doors respond. But when you ignore that window, you may still reach the destination, but through a more complicated path. This is not about condemnation. It is about awareness. God's mercy remains constant, even when we hesitate. But mercy does not erase the reality that some seasons are easier to step into when we respond promptly. There are stories throughout Scripture of people who delayed obedience. Some eventually complied, but the delay cost them peace. It cost them time. It cost them clarity. And yet, even in those stories, God remained faithful. That is important to understand. Ignoring divine timing does not remove you from God's love, but it can prolong your process. The phrase "don't scroll past" carries more depth than it appears. Scrolling past a message may seem insignificant, but spiritually, it can represent a pattern, brushing aside nudges, minimizing promptings, overlooking subtle warnings. When this pattern repeats, sensitivity dulls. What once felt urgent begins to feel optional, and that dullness is dangerous. Not because it angers God, but because it distances you from clarity. The more you ignore gentle direction, the harder it becomes to recognize it when it returns. Here is also the emotional consequence of ignoring divine timing: regret. The quiet question that surfaces later: what if I had responded? Regret does not shout loudly at first. It whispers. It lingers. It reminds you of missed alignments. And while God can restore lost time, the journey back often requires humility and renewed surrender. But here is the balance. God is not standing over you with a stopwatch, eager to close doors the second you hesitate. His urgency is loving. His reminders are protective. He highlights moments because He sees what is ahead. He understands the ripple effect of your decisions. He knows how one act of obedience can prevent years of unnecessary struggle. Ignoring divine timing also affects confidence. Each time you dismiss a prompting, your trust in your own spiritual sensitivity weakens. You begin to second-guess yourself more. You question whether you are truly hearing clearly. But when you respond promptly, your discernment strengthens, your confidence grows, your awareness sharpens. Perhaps you are at a point in your life where you have already experienced the cost of delay. Maybe you recognize the pattern. Maybe you can trace certain frustrations back to moments when you hesitated. If that is you, this is not a message of shame. It is an opportunity for reset. Because here is the powerful truth. Even when we ignore divine timing, God can create new moments. He can arrange fresh intersections. He can bring you back to alignment. But each new window still requires response. Tonight, as the clock moves toward 11:59 p.m., the question is simple. Will you treat this moment casually, or will you treat it as sacred? Sacred moments deserve attention. They deserve reflection. They deserve courage. The consequence of ignoring divine timing is not destruction. It is detour. It is longer routes. It is unnecessary complexity. It is carrying weight that could have been released earlier. And yet, even in detours, God walks with you. So if you sense that this is one of those highlighted moments, do not brush it aside. Do not reduce it to background noise. Lean in. Reflect. Ask God clearly what He's asking of you. And if He reveals even a small step, take it. Because the cost of obedience is temporary discomfort. But the cost of prolonged delay can echo much longer. You are not being pressured. You are being positioned. And recognizing that difference may be the very thing that keeps you from repeating old patterns. There is a reason midnight carries so much weight in the spiritual realm. Midnight is not just the middle of darkness, it is the turning point of darkness. It is the exact second when what felt endless begins to move toward morning. And many people give up at 11:58 because they cannot yet see 12:00. But the shift often happens in the space between what you can measure and what God has already set in motion. You may feel like nothing is changing. You may look at your circumstances and see the same patterns, the same challenges, the same unanswered questions. But what if the silence is not stagnation? What if it is preparation? Midnight shifts rarely announce themselves with noise. They happen quietly, decisively, beneath the surface. When chains broke in the darkest hours in biblical history, they did not warn the prisoners ahead of time. When deliverance arrived at midnight, it interrupted routines that seemed permanent. That is how God works. He allows the pressure to build, not to harm you, but to position you for undeniable transformation. Right now, something is moving that you cannot see. Conversations are aligning. Doors are softening. Resistance is weakening. The very thing that looked immovable may already be cracking beneath the surface. But breakthrough requires endurance to the edge. It requires trust when the clock feels slow. The phrase before 11:59 p.m. is not just a deadline. It is a declaration. It is a reminder that you are closer than you think. Closer to clarity. Closer to release. Closer to the answer that has felt delayed. And the enemy would prefer that you surrender seconds before the shift. Fatigue increases near midnight. Doubt increases near midnight. The temptation to settle increases near midnight. Because giving up right before breakthrough is the quiet strategy of discouragement. But if you can hold your posture of faith through the final minute, you will step into a new atmosphere. There is acceleration in the spirit at the edge of transition. What took months can shift in moments. What felt stuck can suddenly move. What looked final can reverse. But alignment is key. When you align your heart with God's timing, you position yourself to recognize the shift when it comes. Perhaps you have been praying for restoration, or direction, or provision. and it has felt like the answer is suspended in the air. But suspension is not cancellation. Delay is not denial. Sometimes God waits until midnight because when the shift happens at the darkest point, there is no confusion about who caused it. This is your reminder. Do not misinterpret the silence. Do not assume the stillness means inactivity. In the unseen realm, activity does not always produce noise. Seeds grow underground before they ever break the surface, and midnight shifts often begin beneath visible layers. Tonight may not look dramatic. It may look ordinary. But spiritually, it could mark a dividing line. The end of an old mindset. The end of hesitation. The end of fear dictating your pace. And as midnight approaches, heaven watches your posture more than your performance. Will you trust at 11:59? Will you hold faith in the final minute? Will you act when prompted, even if the results are not instantly visible? That posture is what prepares you for what follows. Let me speak prophetically over you. The shift is closer than your doubt suggests. The breakthrough is nearer than your emotions confirm. And the silence you feel is not emptiness. It is the calm before decisive movement. If this resonates deeply, type midnight shift in the comments right now. Blessing code 622 is activated over your life. This number represents divine reversal in the final hour. As you declare it, you are aligning your faith with heaven's timing. And hear this carefully. What you are about to understand next will reveal why this shift is not just personal, but connected to others around you. You will be glad you leaned in for what is about to unfold. As we stand at this prophetic midnight edge, I must speak to those who feel the fire of agreement rising inside them. When you sow into moments like this, you are not giving to a channel. You are fueling a midnight rescue mission for souls who are seconds away from giving up. God says, "Give, and it shall be given unto you." And that promise is alive right now, breathing over your obedience. I am inviting you to step into this shift not only spiritually, but practically, through super thanks, through membership, or through the PayPal link in the description or the QR code on your screen. Your seed becomes light in someone else's darkest hour. This is your moment to act prophetically, to place oil in the lamp so the flame keeps burning across nations. As you give, may chains break in your household, may doors open at your midnight, and may acceleration locate you swiftly. Do not delay. Seal this shift with action. There is something you need to recognize right now. This message was never meant for you alone. Yes, it is personal. Yes, it is precise. Yes, it speaks directly into your moment before 11:59 p.m. But it is also part of something larger than your individual breakthrough. Because when God arranges a moment for one person, He often intends for it to ripple outward. Think about the people connected to your life. Family members, friends, coworkers, someone you haven't spoken to in weeks but who have been on your mind unexpectedly. You may not know what they are carrying tonight. You may not see the internal battle they are fighting, but heaven does. And sometimes, the reason you receive a word is not only for your alignment, it is so you can become a messenger of alignment for someone else. Breakthrough is contagious when it is shared. Obedience multiplies when it is visible. Courage strengthens when it is witnessed. And your response to this message could be the spark that prevents someone else from missing their 11:59 moment. There are people who will never search for a prophetic message on their own. Pride may stop them. Distraction may blind them. Weariness may numb them. But if you share something that pierced your heart, it can bypass their defenses. It can meet them at a vulnerable point they have not expressed publicly. This is why the enemy fights your engagement so quietly. He does not mind you being inspired privately, but he resists when inspiration becomes activation. He resists when you step out of passive listening and into visible agreement, because visibility creates influence. You may underestimate your influence. You may think, I'm just one person. But one person aligned with divine timing can shift atmospheres in entire households. One conversation can redirect someone's decision. One shared message can interrupt someone's spiral. What if someone in your circle is about to give up tonight? What if someone is at their own 11:59, feeling like hope is seconds away from expiring? And what if your simple action, sharing this word, becomes the interruption that reminds them they are not forgotten? This message is bigger than you because your obedience echoes. It echoes into rooms you are not physically in. It echoes into hearts you cannot see. When you step into agreement, you create space for others to do the same. There is also something powerful about public declaration. When you openly align yourself with what God is speaking, you strengthen your own conviction. Silence breeds hesitation. Declaration breeds boldness. When you comment, when you engage, when you share, you are not just interacting digitally, you are affirming spiritually. If this message has stirred something inside you, do not keep it to yourself. Like this video as a visible sign that you recognize divine timing. Comment "I won't miss my moment" as a declaration that you are stepping into alignment before 11:59 p.m. Subscribe to this channel so you remain connected to the words God is arranging for your life. And most importantly, share this message with someone who needs to hear that their moment is not accidental. Your share button can become someone else's answered prayer. Your comment can become someone else's confirmation. Your decision to stay connected can ensure you never miss another appointed interruption. Faith is not meant to be hidden in private corners. It is meant to shine. And when you allow your agreement to be visible, you participate in something larger than personal growth. You participate in collective awakening. Consider this. When one person responds to divine timing, it creates momentum in their environment. People notice change. They notice peace. They notice courage. And sometimes they ask, what shifted? That is your opportunity to point them back to the moment you chose not to scroll past. Before 11:59 p.m., something is aligning not only for you, but for those connected to you. The ripple effect has already begun. The question is whether you will lean into it intentionally. This message is bigger than you because your story is intertwined with others. Your obedience strengthens someone else's faith. Your boldness encourages someone else's step. Your alignment accelerates someone else's clarity. Do not treat this as a solitary encounter. Treat it as a launching point. Because when God arranges a moment, He rarely limits its impact to one life. And what you are about to hear next will reveal why the window that is open right now will not remain open indefinitely. The urgency is loving, but it is real. There is a powerful truth that many people struggle to accept. Grace opens doors, but doors do not remain open indefinitely. When God says, "Open now before 11:59 p.m., it is not to create anxiety. It is to emphasize that some windows are seasonal. They are intentional. They are designed for a specific moment in your journey. And when that moment passes, the opportunity may look different. Right now, the door is still open. The invitation is still active. A grace attached to this moment is still flowing. But time is moving, and movement requires response. Throughout life, you will encounter what can only be described as divine windows. Periods when clarity feels heightened, when conviction feels stronger, when courage feels accessible. These windows are gifts. They are seasons where alignment is easier because heaven is emphasizing direction. But when those seasons shift, the same decision can feel heavier. It is important to understand this correctly. God is not closing doors out of impatience. He is guiding you through seasons that have rhythms. Death is of us as a time, and Glendon as a time, the opportunity as a time. The phrase before 11:59 p.m. symbolizes the final moments of a grace period. You may sense it in your spirit. The awareness that something is culminating, that a chapter is concluding, that an old pattern is reaching its end. And when you sense that culmination, it is wise to respond with intention, because hesitation at the edge of transition can create unnecessary tension. There are people who look back on their lives and recognize specific moments when the door was clearly open. They felt it. They knew it. But fear convinced them to wait. Comfort convinced them to postpone. And when they finally tried to step forward, the circumstances had shifted. The opportunity was not entirely gone, but it required rebuilding what could have been accessed more smoothly earlier. This is not about pressure. It is about awareness. The door being open is a sign of favor. It is a sign that heaven has prepared something ahead of you. But favor responds to faith, and faith expresses itself through movement. You may be wondering what this door represents in your life. For some, it is a decision to release what has been draining you. For others, it is stepping into responsibility you have been avoiding. For others still, it is surrendering control in an area where pride has quietly held on. The form of the door may vary, but the principle remains the same. When God highlights a moment with urgency, He is protecting you from prolonged delay. Delay is comfortable in the short term. It allows you to remain in familiar patterns. But comfort can quietly steal progress, and progress often requires stepping through doors that stretch you. The door is still open right now. The peace you feel as you listen is evidence of that openness. The clarity rising in your thoughts is evidence. The sense of alignment is evidence. But the longer you wait, the more your emotions may attempt to complicate what is simple. There is also something profound about recognizing that obedience before a window closes strengthens your confidence. When you act within the appointed time, you build trust in your own responsiveness. You learn to move with rhythm instead of resistance. Imagine standing in front of a doorway that is slowly beginning to close. Not slammed shut, not locked abruptly, but gradually narrowing. You still have space to pass through, but that space requires decisiveness. That is what spiritual urgency feels like. It is gentle, but real. Some people misunderstand urgency and associate it with fear. But true divine urgency carries peace alongside it. It says, "Now is the time," without panic. It invites courage without coercion. As 11:59 p.m. approaches, consider what you want to carry into the next chapter. Do you want to carry unresolved hesitation? Or do you want to carry the confidence of having responded when called? Doors that close are not always gone forever, but they may reopen in different forms at different costs in different seasons. And the simplicity of this moment may not return in the same way. This is your grace period. This is your highlighted window. This is the final minute before something shifts. And heaven is not demanding perfection, only willingness. The door is still open, but not forever. There is something sobering and powerful about this moment. Heaven is watching your response. Not in a way that is intimidating, not in a way that is harsh or critical, but in a way that is attentive, intentional, invested. Because when God arranges a moment specifically for you, your reaction to it matters. Throughout Scripture, response has always been the dividing line between stagnation and movement. It was never just about hearing, it was about acting. Many heard instructions, many witnessed miracles, but only those who responded step into transformation. And right now, before 11:59 p.m., your response is writing something in the unseen realm. You may feel like you are alone, simply listening to a message in a quiet space. But spiritually, this is not isolated. There is an awareness surrounding moments like this. When conviction rises in your heart, when clarity settles into your thoughts, when courage begins to replace hesitation, that shift is seen. God does not measure your worth by performance. He measures your posture by willingness. And willingness is revealed in response. You have heard the urgency. You have sensed the alignment. You understand that this is not random. Now the question becomes, what will you do with what you have heard? There are times when obedience looks dramatic. It requires visible change, bold declarations, public decisions. But sometimes obedience is deeply internal. It is a private surrender, a quiet release, a firm internal yes. And even those unseen responses carry weight. Angels respond to obedience. Favor responds to alignment. Movement in the spiritual realm often follows decisions made in stillness. When you choose faith over fear in the final minute, something shifts beyond what you can see. Think about how many times people in biblical history stood at the edge of instruction. They could have turned away. They could have doubted. They could have waited. But their yes activated outcomes far beyond their imagination. Your yes may not feel dramatic in the moment, but it carries ripple effects you cannot yet measure. Before 11:59 p.m., your response becomes a declaration. It declares whether you trust divine timing. It declares whether you are willing to step through the open door. It declares whether you recognize the sacredness of this arrangement. And let this settle into your spirit. God already knows what you will choose, yet He still gives you the dignity of decision. That is love. He does not force compliance. He invites agreement. And your agreement unlocks cooperation between heaven's plan and your participation. Perhaps you are wrestling internally even now. Part of you feels ready. Another part feels cautious. A tension is natural at the edge of transition. But tension is not a sign to retreat. It is a sign that something meaningful is at stake. Heaven is not evaluating you with impatience. It is watching with anticipation. Anticipation of your growth. Anticipation of your breakthrough. Anticipation of your alignment. What you decide before midnight may not be visible to others immediately, but it will be visible in your peace, in your confidence, in the subtle shift of your atmosphere. When you respond in faith, even quietly, you carry a new steadiness into the next day. There is also something powerful about understanding that your response sets precedent. When you answer divine nudges quickly, you train your spirit to recognize them more clearly in the future. You strengthen the connection of individual and action. You build a pattern of trust, and trust compounds. Each act of obedience makes the next one easier. Each moment of alignment sharpens your sensitivity. Over time, responding becomes less of a struggle and more of a reflex. Right now, this is not just about one decision. It is about establishing a rhythm of listening and acting, of recognizing and moving, of hearing and obeying. Heaven is watching your response because your response determines momentum, and momentum carries you into what is next. The clock is still ticking. The door is still open. The shift is still near. And in these final moments before midnight, You have the opportunity to solidify your alignment. When the clock strikes 12:00, let it find you already decided, already surrendered, already aligned, because what comes next will not just mark a new hour, it will mark a new chapter shaped by how you responded in this one. This moment will not fade into the background of your life. It will not dissolve like ordinary noise. It will mark your story. Whether quietly or boldly, whether internally or visibly, something about tonight, about this exact arrangement before 11:59 p.m., will become a reference point in your journey. One day you may look back and say, that was the night I decided. The night you stopped postponing. The night you chose alignment over hesitation. The night you recognized that what felt random was actually orchestrated. Because when God says, this is not a coincidence, I arranged this moment for you, He is not speaking casually. He is declaring intentional involvement in your life. You were not drifting through this day unnoticed. You were being guided. You were being positioned. Every delay, every confirmation, every stirring in your spirit led to this intersection. And now, as the final minutes approach, you stand at the edge of transition with clarity you did not have before. The enemy may have tried to convince you that your life is a series of accidents, that opportunities are random, that timing is luck. But tonight dismantles that illusion. Tonight reveals design. It reveals that even in ordinary routines there is divine orchestration. Before midnight strikes, I want you to internalize this truth. You are seen. Your prayers were heard. Your silent questions were not ignored. The timing of this message is evidence that heaven responds with precision. And as the clock moves forward, carry peace with you. Not pressure, not fear. Peace. Because if God arranged this moment, He has also arranged what comes after it. You are not stepping into uncertainty alone. You are stepping into a prepared path. Whatever decision you have solidified tonight, whether to release something, to act on something, to surrender something, trust that grace will meet you in the next chapter. The same God who positioned you here will sustain you there. There is assurance in that. Assurance that obedience will not leave you stranded. Assurance that alignment will not result in abandonment. Assurance that the one who called you to respond is faithful to complete what He begins. Let this be the night you stop minimizing divine interruptions. Let this be the night you recognize that scrolling can pause destiny, but obedience can activate it. Let this be the night you carried faith across the threshold of midnight. As a final act of agreement, type "My story is shifting" in the comments right now. Blessing code 108 is activated over your life. This number symbolizes new beginnings marked by divine completion. As you declare it, you are prophetically sealing this chapter and stepping into the next with confidence. And hear this closing declaration over you. The rest of your story will not be written by hesitation. It will be written by courage. It will be written by responsiveness. It will be written by trust in divine timing. You did not scroll past. You opened. You listened. You responded. And that alone has already shifted something in the unseen. Walk into the new day knowing this. God arranged this moment, and because He did, nothing about your future is accidental. As this moment seals your story, I must speak to those who feel the weight of destiny in their spirit. When you sow into this mission, you are not funding content. You are igniting lamps in the final minutes before someone else's midnight. The Lord declares, those who sow in tears shall reap in joy, and that promise is breathing over every seed released in faith. I am asking you to move now, through super thanks, through membership, or through the PayPal link in the description or the QR code on your screen. and become a co-laborer in this divine assignment. Your giving becomes oil for the flame, manna for the weary, light for the scrolling soul about to give up. This is a prophetic act, not a transaction. As you give, may heaven respond with multiplied provision, guarded doors, and accelerated favor over your household. Step into obedience with generosity. Activate the harvest. This moment mark your story, and what begins now will carry the signature of divine timing.